Welcome to Lawyers Coach. My name is Oliver Hansard, and each episode of this podcast will feature myself or Claire Rayson, both of us coaches and former lawyers, trying to find out what makes lawyers tick. We'll be hearing from various guests and experts, and then at the end of each episode, we will both be reflecting on what they said. Jonathan Grigg took over as managing partner of UK regional firm Boyes Turner on the 1st of April 2020. The firm was facing a situation that no succession plan could ever have factored in. Jonathan spoke to Claire about how he has risen to the challenge and about why communication is at the heart of his approach. But he started by revealing why he became a lawyer.
Oh my goodness, I've got to remember now. Well, the true answer is my dad said to me, and he was a practical man, being a farmer, you need to get a trade. So other than a plumber or an electrician or a carpenter, and we both decided that I wasn't going to be a farmer. So if I was going to go to university and learn a trade, then a legal degree at least felt that there was going to be a career at the end of it. And so the die was cast.
And you've obviously continued on that kind of trajectory, and you've been a very successful lawyer. What have you enjoyed most about being a lawyer?
I love the problem solving element, but it's the people. You're privileged to be able to help people through some quite difficult times, get close to their businesses, get close to them as people, and that's fascinating and a privilege. So I've enjoyed that side of it.
And I mentioned at the beginning, you're now recently appointed managing partner of Boyes Turner, and you obviously come to the role in quite an interesting time. So I wonder if you could just tell me a little bit about what it's been like for you coming to a role in what's been, a very weird time for everybody.
Yeah, so I was fortunate at Boyes Turner because there was a succession plan in place. So I kind of knew probably about a year ahead of my appointment. Of course, the downside of that is that my embryonic plans for growth and domination of the legal market in the UK and beyond were put on hold come 1st of April. And certainly from March, it was a question of day to day and then week to week just to ensure we've got stability in the business. But I suppose it goes back to those problem solving skills, those people skills, the communication skills that you need to try and bring into sharp focus. So the goals slightly changed, and the horizon definitely changed. But now we're beginning to broaden that horizon and look further ahead and try and implement some of those growth plans. So yes, it's been interesting, but I've enjoyed the challenge, and I wouldn't have wanted to have taken up the role without not necessarily this particular challenge, but to be able to help the business and help the business through and help the people through difficult times.
And do you think taking over a period where, it's been, as you mentioned, kind of difficult there for people, and for some it will have been more difficult than others, do you think that that's helped you kind of hit the ground running and have people see you as managing partner?
Yes, I think it has. I think actually it's been a benefit because people are looking to the leadership team for direction and looking ultimately to the managing partner for direction, and you need to step up and take that challenge. And so I think strangely it's been a positive in a sense of cementing your role and your position within the firm.
What have you done to try and kind of get that buy-in and that influence remotely?
It has brought home to me the importance of communication at all levels within the firm, and inclusivity. So trying to get everyone at every level, not just looking at the partner group, not just looking at senior lawyers, but everyone within the firm. And I think having to work remotely, you can't take anything for granted on communication. You need to ensure that the WhatsApp groups, the Zoom communication, the team conversations are happening. And I think certainly within the office environment, there's a certain amount of communication that you take for granted. And you can't do that remotely. So you have to work hard at it. But I think that can be quite a positive exercise, or I found it to be quite a positive process and learning curve, because you're learning all the time. That's the other thing you learn as a managing partner, not to take anything for granted and just to keep learning. And some things work and some things don't, and try and take the positive things and build on those, and jettison what doesn't work and move on.
And have you got any examples of things that have worked really well that perhaps people listening might be able to kind of use themselves?
What we began to do is a weekly email update, but that quickly morphed into becoming a kind of video blog. So every week I do a kind of video message to everyone. Sometimes it's difficult information, and you know, when we were talking about furlough and talking about reduced hours, that conversation and that message was difficult, and sometimes it's lighter. But I think we all have to be a little more human. You know, Zoom meetings and everyone working from home, there's a lot more flexibility. I think people have loosened up in their approach to work. They loosened up in the way they look, the way they communicate, and that's not a bad thing in a historically conservative industry. I think I was fortunate in Boys Turner, we were probably less conservative than some, but that's been a really positive, and has been received really well by by the majority of people.
And do you think that, I think law firms have obviously been forced to go remote, or at least, 100% remote. I don't think it was something that many firms would have chosen to do right now if the situation hadn't been as it was. What do you think is going to kind of carry on into, I hate the term new normal, but we'll use it anyway. When people start going back into the office, what do you think is going to stay, and what do you think will soon be a thing of the past, and old habits die hard?
Yeah, we actually have a swear box, so that if anyone mentions new normal, we have a fine. So you've already committed a fine, or you have to have a drink. But it's probably
I'll have a drink then.
it's probably a bit early for that. I think people will want a lot more flexibility. So I think there are a couple of things that the idea that everyone works best around a 9 to 5 structure, coming into the office 5 days a week, I think will be jettisoned. I think people want a lot more flexibility around work patterns. Not everyone does their best work within the confines of a 9 to 5 regime. The other sort of myth that's been exploded is the fact that you can't trust people to work at home, and they're not particularly productive and they get distracted. And there was a sense in some quarters that someone taking a decision to work at home on a Friday was slightly swinging the lead. That myth has been busted apart. I think people have seen productivity increase. People have felt a lot more focused at home and working remotely. We still will want to get together. We still will want, we're social animals, and I think we're all missing that social interaction, and that can be a really positive experience. And that will be what the office will be used for, rather than a place of dedicated work.
And in terms of kind of going back to the office and the balance between having people work from home and be in the office, one of the things that I've kind of read and lots of people have been talking about is how, location is not going to be the driver that it once was. So, where people start to work from home more, and where that becomes more normal, actually having a fixed location is going to become less important. So, if that holds good, what impact do you think that's going to have on regional firms? One of the advantages for which has always been, well, we're local to the businesses that we serve. We don't have the overheads of London offices. Do you think that's going to have an impact?
Yeah, it will be challenging, but in a sense, it means that we can cast our net certainly a lot wider when it comes to recruitment. I think there was a tendency to look at and recruit from within your local market and recruit from a pool of people depending on their ability to commute to the office. I think we can blow that apart, and there's no reason why we wouldn't be able to recruit from anywhere within the UK. And actually being based, we still have to a certain extent the cost advantages of being based outside of London in particular. But I think law firms, real estate, there will be a real challenge in how that is used, because I think there'll be less demand for those city centre office spaces, and less business need to have those, but you will still have that expensive resource that you can't just immediately turn off. So we need to think creatively about how we use that resource going forward.
And changing tack slightly, so one of the things that you mentioned at the beginning was around succession planning, and how you were lucky to have that kind of succession planning in place, and kind of a long period going into now. Um, Obviously, lots of firms, and this might well have accelerated some succession plans in some firms, where perhaps some people have decided that actually now, with all the change, it's time for them to think about their succession planning. Um, Having been on the receiving end of it, do you have some thoughts on what worked well, what could have been improved?
I think succession planning is very different in each firm, and you need to look at the culture within the firm. As with most things, it's planning. It's asking some difficult questions, some honesty around roles and individual roles and what people are achieving. So it's having the bravery to have those difficult conversations and communicate and ask the questions around the individuals and who is up for particular roles and where the firm wants to be. So getting the partnership together and deciding how best to take the firm forward.
And you've mentioned kind of taking the firm forward, and I know it's something that you're passionate about and something that you want to do at Boys Turner. With everything that's kind of been happening over the past few months, do you think that that's going to make it easier for you to go in the direction that you want to go?
There are financial constraints, and we're not entirely sure where it's going to fall. We know there's a deep recession coming. We don't know whether we're going to bounce back quickly. So in terms of moving the firm forward, growing, investing for the future, those decisions will, I think, be impacted by the financial and the economic environment in which we're operating. And you still need to invest, and you still need to back the parts of your business that are successful. You need to do that horizon gazing to say, well, actually, we're pretty sure that employment, for example, insolvency, restructuring are going to be busy, and we need the people, we need the trainees coming through in those areas. But as I say, it's not entirely clear right now where the economic environment is going to be, and whether we're going to have a similar recession to 2008, where lots of practice groups were impacted across the board. So in some ways, it makes it easier to be radical and be transformative. But as I say, that's against the backdrop of the economic environment in which you operate.
You've mentioned communication a few times, and it's something that I kind of am quite passionate about. And I'm sure that as a firm, you've been talking to your clients through this period. What have you been doing to kind of communicate with clients over this time?
So social interaction on kind of social media has been, and through technology has been more important. So podcasts and webinars. There are some universal truths, and you need to have one-to-one conversations with clients and contacts. And you need to pick up the phone, and you need to empathize, and you need to speak to people on a very human one-to-one level. And so there's no substitute for doing that. Yes, ways and means in which, you know, you can't get 30 people in a room anymore. And there are technological ways in which you can do that virtually. But the old adage of pick up the phone, and I'm thinking very much on business services side, for our private client parts of the business, I think it's brought into sharp relief how important our website is, how important that is as a means of communication and a means of interaction. So not just a shop window, but as a means of, as I say, communicating directly with individuals who are interested in your firm and interested in communicating with you.
And I've seen, there's been some quite scary statistics flying around about how badly lawyers have done in terms of picking up the phone, um, and how, actually the default has been either, email communications or mass communications rather than actually just picking up the phone and talking. Why do you think that's the case? You know, why do you think lawyers aren't good at just picking up the phone?
Oh, that's. I mean,
not to say that that's true at Boyce Turner or
no. But I think that's true of most lawyers, and it's a continual challenge to get lawyers in particular to interact and pick up the phone and just speak with people, whether that's to chase a bill or just to say, well, how are you doing? Whether it's lawyers are quite goal orientated, are quite focused in terms of, what's the purpose of me picking up the phone? Is it going to result in a job? Is it going to result in a new piece of work? Is it, and some of those communications are just part of the bedrock of relationship building. And you can't immediately see a return on that investment in terms of time. So lawyers, as you will know, Claire, are very, very good at kind of doing the work that's there in front of them. But in terms of planning for and building for those future relationships, maybe not so good. The psychology of lawyers, you'll probably know more about than me, but it's true. That's not something that comes easily to most of us, or something that we do very particularly well.
And I know that it's something, we've worked together, and I know that it's something that you're always kind of, are a supporter and banging the drum on in terms of trying to get people to be better at communicating and better at just talking to clients. In your view, how can you crack it? What are the things that you're going to try and do as managing partner to get people to have those conversations?
It's very rare that you can put your foot in it or you can say something wrong.
There's still time.
there is still time, and the proof of the pudding is at the end of this discussion. But don't be afraid, and don't be afraid at kind of showing the person who you are. Don't be afraid of some integrity and being honest about yourself. It's okay to phone up and just have a chat with a client or a contact and say, how are you? Actually, it's pretty rough for us, and we've had some struggles, but how are you doing? There's a sense that as lawyers, we always kind of need to know the answers. We need to be always that kind of stable individual who kind of, is unhurried, unruffled, and actually sometimes you can let your guard down and just be honest about what's going on. And I think it's important to do that. And that's the same with any conversation, be it internally or externally. So I'm not sure there's a magic wand other than just encouraging people to step up and do it.
I couldn't agree more. And hopefully, one of the things that will come out of this period is, as you say, I think people have had to show their authentic selves more than perhaps they would in normal time. And hopefully that's one of the things that kind of continues on through, whatever the next phase looks like. One of the things, kind of thinking about authenticity and your role, one of the things that leaders often talk about is, that it's lonely at the top, that it's really hard to find people around them that they can talk to about some of the challenges and struggles that they're having. perhaps slightly different in a law firm where, you know, you've got lots of partners who all own the business. Have you found the transition from partner to managing partner been one that's put you in a situation where you've kind of looked around and thought, gosh, who can I turn to?
No, but I'm fortunate. You know, Boys Turner, I have often thought of it as a family, maybe a dysfunctional family, but a family. And you can turn to people, and there are plenty of individuals you can turn to if you just want to bounce an idea off, if you just are hesitant about an approach, about a method of communication, about a means of communication. So no, I've been very fortunate in leading a firm that's been very supportive, and I've been, particularly when we were kind of going through, you know, the early stages, and you know there was announcements from Boris every 5 minutes about, and things were moving very quickly. Lots of people asked how I was doing, and were thoughtful and had the emotional intelligence to say, well, actually, Jonathan's just taken over this role. You know, I wonder how he's doing, and that's. You know, that's indicative of the firm and the type of firm it is, and that it's not just about the individual, it is about the collective. So I'm very fortunate.
And thinking about kind of that collective and the culture, you know, one of the things that it strikes me kind of going forward that's going to be really important is how you maintain that culture and how you maintain that sense of collective when, you know, people are, I mean, currently, you know, everyone's kind of working from home, but at some point in time, you know, there's likely to be that flexibility that you talked about where, you know, people don't come together as much as they used to. People are perhaps working different working patterns. You know, how are you going to try and keep that culture alive in a situation where people are a bit more disparate?
By working really hard at it, and preparing hard, and getting meetings in the diary, and having an agenda, and having a clear purpose, and working at it. You know, I've got I've got a partners meeting coming up tomorrow, which is more of a question of us just being able to get together remotely. But you can't just sling people in a room and say, well, let's just have a chat. And you know, you need to have an agenda. You need to have some items for, even if it's not, you know, we're not there to make a decision. A partnership decision is not a formal meeting. It's more us getting together as a collective, but it needs to be managed, and it kind of needs to be chaired, and it needs to have a direction, and it needs to have a focus, even if that focus is nothing more than allowing everyone to have a voice, and allowing everyone to contribute. And I think you just need to work a little bit harder at that. And I think that's probably no bad thing. And I think even when the lockdown is, restrictions are, and we can get back to the office, I don't want to fall back into the old ways of just, you know, let's just put everyone in a room and let's just hope for some alchemy that's just going to happen, you know, without really actually trying to plan for that meeting, plan the purpose, plan the agenda, and think about it and prepare for it. And that is something I think I've learned.
You kind of preempted my next question, which is, you know, what do you think you've learned about yourself having kind of taken this role, and particularly in taking this role in what's a challenging time?
Oh, well, I'm still learning. I've learned that I'm enjoying it a lot more than maybe I thought I would. I do like the challenge. I do like, and I just love the interaction with so many more people around the firm, and learning about people and finding out how they tick and what's going on in their lives. And it's and trying to just move this firm forward, and trying to get everyone in a place where they feel they can contribute and are valued, because, and you also discover things you never did. You discover how many people just love the place and love their colleagues, and just want to be positive. And it's just about creating that environment where they can direct that positive energy. So I'm enjoying it, and at the start of a journey, and who knows where that journey will end. But no, it's been And in some ways I've been lucky to take over when I have, and had these immediate challenges that have forced me to make some difficult decisions.
One last question is around communication, because the thread for me through everything that we've been talking about is communication, both in terms of communicating with staff, communicating with clients, and also kind of communicating the culture and the vision that you have and that you want to bring forward. How good do you think are law firms at teaching soft skills? Because communication is something that's kind of taken for granted a bit and not often talked about or taught. So do you think that that's something that should change?
Yes, I think it should, and I think law firms are infinitely better than they used to be. I mean, certainly over my career, communication has increased, but I think there is always a slight fear around providing too much information or too much communication, or trying to engage too much. And I'm learning that actually and also a sense of just trying to manage a message. And I just, in my heart, I don't think you really need to worry about that. I think you need to treat people as grown-ups and let people make their own decisions and let them see what's going on. And you can only do that at every level if you speak to people and you try and communicate the truth as honestly as you can, whether that's a good message or a bad message. And you're right, that is a skill to be learned. I've certainly learned it over my career, sometimes the hard way. But if we can do that through bringing in some external or bringing and some objectivity, being able to bring that in from outside can be really, really valuable at all levels within a firm.
And you kind of mentioned learning on the job there, because the other thing for me with law firms that I always find interesting is that you kind of come to be partner, in part or almost often only because you're good at the client side, you're good at bringing the work in, and actually those leadership skills, those management skills have perhaps always been a bit kind of secondary to how good you are at kind of billing. Do you think that that's going to change now, where working remotely, actually those leadership skills are going to be even more important going forward?
That is absolutely fundamental, because it's about creating that environment for your team to be able to thrive, and you can only do that if you engage with people and communicate and listen. And I know, Claire, you're a great advocate of listening rather than just. It's not a question of what you say; it's a question of actually, listening to what people are saying to you, and then trying to act upon that. And that's a skill that lawyers need to learn. Well, I think probably we all need to learn, but lawyers in particular are not great at listening. We're the people that need to talk. We're the one that needs to fill that void, because we think that people need to understand what we're saying. But you have to listen, and it's a fundamental skill that's very often ignored.
I couldn't agree more. As you know, we had many a conversation about listening. So, Jonathan, it's been really lovely speaking to you, and I've just found it really fascinating, and I'm sure our listeners will get a lot from it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Great to speak to you.
That was Jonathan Grigg of Boys Turner speaking to Claire Rayson. Claire's with me now. What really struck me, Claire, was his emphasis on communication.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting that he obviously hasn't felt inhibited by the fact that all communications are now virtual. I wonder how much that's, the fact that he was already comfortable and knew the team, that, presumably has had a part in it. But it clearly is something that, is very close to his heart. And not only was he talking about communication with his team, but also in terms of communications with clients. And that for me was a really powerful message that I got out of the session with Jonathan.
And he was really encouraging his lawyers just to pick up the phone.
Yeah, and it seems crazy that we're talking about encouraging people to pick up the phone when everything is done by phone or Zoom at the moment. But I think the power of having those one-to-one conversations shouldn't be underestimated. And it was really interesting, I think, his reflection that lawyers perhaps aren't very good at they need to provide solutions rather than perhaps just pick up the phone for no reason. And I know, Oliver, perhaps you can share your thoughts, but, it was one of the hardest things I think that I have had to learn on my journey as a coach, you're not there to provide the solutions, you're there to provide a space where people can reflect. And, that for me has been a real skill that I've learned. And not one that I think I would have had the opportunity to learn had I not decided to go down the path of being a coach. I don't know if it was the same for you.
I think for me, the biggest skill I've had to learn is to enable my clients to find their solutions. And there's definitely something that lawyers can learn from that. Again, to your point about not bringing all the solutions to the table, but really listen hard, give the client space, enable them to work out the best solution in their particular context. I think just as coaches, I think lawyers could benefit from that sort of thinking as well.
Yeah, I agree.
It was also interesting when he said that the myth that people can't be trusted to work at home had truly been busted.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it will be interesting to see what law firms do with that, because actually, it has been a constant source of contention, and one of the reasons why firms have been reluctant to fully open up to and embrace remote working. But, for many firms, they will have their offices, they will have their leases. And, I wonder whether, what will happen, whether firms will, perhaps embrace it a little more, but will they still go back to using the office?
I'm sure that's right in some respects. But what he was saying about the importance of the office becoming a social space, both internally, but also with clients. Be really interesting to see how much of that comes into play.
Yeah, and I guess, the dangers with that are, making sure that the boundaries are set such that, you're not doing your social day in the office and then coming home and doing your working day. So I think that there's going to be a really interesting, or lots of interesting discussions that are going to need to be had about, what does a working day look like? The 9 to 5 perhaps is a thing of the past, and how do we balance that with the needs of needing to get people together? Because I think the current climate has underlined that it is important for people to physically see each other, but balance that with a recognition that actually perhaps some people work better from home in their own space and on their own timetable.
But also balance it with the fact that the office cost is a massive overhead, a massive fixed cost for any professional services business, and I'm sure the finance teams will be really keen to reduce that cost as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder whether actually the direction of travel will be much like some of the professional services, big four, who, have a clock in, clock out system, and where there are offices that can be used, but, not everyone has their own office, and it's very much flexible in terms of, whether you get, you choose to come in or not.
Well, Claire, thanks so much for sharing your conversation with Jonathan.
It was a pleasure.
I do hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Lawyers Coach podcast. We'll be back with another episode soon. So thanks for listening, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Lawyers Coach is brought to you by Client Talk and Hansard Coaching. If you're enjoying this series, please rate us on your podcast provider so that others can find us. If you're a lawyer and would like to take part in Lawyers Coach, please visit our website lawyercoach.co.uk for further details. And you can also join the conversation on our LinkedIn group Lawyers Coach. If there are any topics you'd like to hear us discuss, then just get in touch.